Everyone, today we'll be going through how you can scrape any website within Zapier. Now, I've made a similar video for make.com, but I had a couple of you reach out and ask how you can do the same within Zapier. Now, a lot of the fundamental principles are the same around the different methods of scraping, but Zapier has a couple of different features out of the box that Make doesn't have, and it also has a few things missing that Make does have. So, as you can see on my screen right now, I'm within the Zapier interface, and we're going to cover three main methods of web scraping. And the site we'll be scraping today is the Supabase website. So if you haven't used Supabase before, it's a open source Firebase alternative, but not super relevant for this video in terms of our scraping and how that all works. So with scraping, there's a couple of different ways, right? So one is just to get all the text on a page. So that's just build in a weekend, scale to millions, all this sort of stuff, right? And depending on what your use case is, that is often enough, right? Maybe you just want to scrape the value proposition of a list of different startup websites, in which case generally scraping the text will be more than enough for what you need. But there are other use cases that are a bit more advanced where scraping the text is not enough. So as an example of that, right, if we look down here on the Supabase website, there's all these images. These images are sort of brands that use Supabase. And as an example, maybe I'm scraping a list of 100 startups and I want to get their sort of flagship customers for each startup. Now, if I was only scraping the text for the website or the HTML for the website, oftentimes I won't be able to get these logos and sort of parse these logos into the underlying companies that these logos represent. So today, as we go through the different methods for scraping within Zapier, we're going to go through the text-based scraping approach as well as a more vision or image-based scraping approach so that you can do things like getting all of these logos and then parsing them into the underlying companies for those logos, or at least reading the text in these images. Cool. So before I dive into those three methods, I just want to sort of flag quickly that web scraping is sort of a fundamental skill. So at the end of this, it's really up to you to come up with ways to apply web scraping. So as an example, a lot of people I see, they do client research or lead research with web scraping. So it's really up to you how you apply it. I'm just giving you the skills you need in order to scrape any website within Zapier. Cool. So what we're going to start with today is the built-in method within Zapier. So Zapier actually has a web parser. So to find that, when you drag in a new step within your Zap, if you just type in web parser up here, you'll find that there is a web parser by Zapier. And this actually works pretty well for most basic websites. So as you can see here, I've set it up. It's just scraping Supabase and I'm getting it to return the markdown. So with the markdown, they actually do a bit of cleaning. So they try to remove some of the noise in the HTML. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. I'll let you be the judge of that. If you sort of know what you're doing a bit more, you can just return the full HTML for the page. And if you do that, then you have a lot more control over what data you want to extract from the HTML. So in this case, I'm just extracting the markdown. And you can see here, I've run this already. And the content it's extracted is just every project is a full Postgres database, all this sort of stuff. And you can see here, like it's missing this whole beginning section, right? If we keep scrolling down, it started scraping from here. Every project is a full Postgres database. And this is the problem when you sort of have this automated cleaning. And it's not just Zapier that faces this, right? Like every other scraping service out there that has like an automated cleaning type approach can run into these sorts of issues. And they might not run into this issue on Supabase, but they'll run into a similar issue on other sites. Just because every website is so different and like there's so many edge cases out there, there is no 100% way of just getting the exact data you need unless you're using like an LLM in the background, in which case it will be very expensive to do that at scale. So that's just the built-in method for Zapier. For this case, it doesn't work super well because it hasn't cleaned the content very well. It's sort of just stripped out all the information that we actually want. And it's only kept this little section here, which is not super helpful for us. So if we were using the built-in method within Zapier, I would actually probably use the HTML method and then process it after that. But the downside with that, obviously, is with HTML, you return a lot of text. And if you are passing your scraped content into a large language model, such as GPT-4o or Claude 3 afterwards, passing in the whole HTML will take up a lot of tokens, a lot of the context window for that LLM, and means generally slower responses as well as higher cost. Cool. So that's the built-in method within Zapier. If you've used make.com before, you will know that in make.com you can actually make HTTP requests. Unfortunately, within Zapier, there is no easy way to do that. I believe you can do it on sort of an enterprise plan, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But in terms of what's available broadly to all users on Zapier, there's the web parser by Zapier. So the next method I'm going to go through is using a third-party service. Now, there's a couple of services out there. I'm sure you can Google it, scraping services, and they'll all come up. But today I'm going to go through Dumpling AI. So the most basic option with Dumpling AI is scrape URL. So with scrape URL, there's a couple of options, right? So one is, again, you can return the markdown or HTML, which is the exact same as web parser by Zapier. The difference here is you can either clean the data or not clean the data. So Dumpling AI provides that option to you to either do the automated cleaning or not do it. So in this case, I've run it with the automated cleaning, and we can see here, like it returns a bit more data, like it returns the metadata, all that sort of stuff. But if we look at the content, you can see that it's sort of skipped that initial section again, right? The build in a week and scale to millions. So if we look here, it's got work seamlessly with 20 plus frameworks, start building, we introspect your database, all this sort of stuff, and then build in a weekend, scale to millions was at the bottom. So if we scroll down, it looks like it's sort of scraped sort of the bottom part of the page, which again is not what we want. We wanted the full page, all the text on the page. So if you did want something like that and you're using a service like Dumpling AI, what you would do is just turn off the clean data option. So just turn that to false and it will no longer clean the data. Now, in many cases, you're not going to be sort of scraping one URL at a time. You'll be scraping sort of hundreds of URLs in bulk. In those cases, it's really up to you to do sort of a mini test run, maybe on a batch of 10, and see if the cleaning data is working well on your set of URLs. If it's not, just turn it off, and then you'll sort of be able to run it with the clean data step off. So I've turned off the cleaning the data. And if we run this again, it should just return all the text on the page. And the downside of that is we'll also get like the nav bar and that sort of stuff. But since we're just passing it into a large language model afterwards, it's not the end of the world. So we've got a response now, come down into content. You can see we've got the whole nav bar here. We've got the webinar, we've got build in a weekend scale to millions. We've got basically everything from the top of the page all the way to the bottom. And if we're passing this into a large language model like GPT-4o or Claude 3.5, we can easily extract out what we need. And it's not too many extra tokens because we've taken out all the random like HTML tags that we don't actually want, right? Awesome. Cool. So these two methods that we've gone through so far, one is using the built-in Zapier method, two is using another service such as Dumpling AI. These are both sort of text-based scraping approaches, right? Both of these approaches don't actually give you these logos that you would want if you're doing, as I mentioned before, if I'm scraping the top customers for different, I need a way to be able to scrape logos. So both of these methods don't do that. If you look even in the full method, you can see here that the images are not really scraped, it's just text. So if you want to scrape things that are in images or logos, that sort of stuff, you will need to do a vision-based scraping approach or an image-based scraping approach. So for that, you will need to use a third-party service within Zapier. Again, I'm using Dumpling AI here, and what I'm doing is just screenshotting a URL. So in terms of my setup here, it's super simple. I've put in the super base URL and I've just said I want to screenshot the full page, and I've just left everything else as the default, and I've just set the viewport width as 1024, which is like a relatively small screen. You can make it wider if you want. I find 1024 seems to work pretty well for most cases, and this is just the default setting for this step within Zapier. So I've already run this and it comes back with a URL, right? So I open the URL, you'll see it's taken a screenshot of the full Superbase page. So if I zoom in here, you can see it's got yeah, it's basically the page, right? It's got all the logos, it's got everything here, and it's just all in an image format. So you can see it's come back as a PNG. So in order to extract data out of this, it's very similar to when you have the text. You need to pass it through a large language model in order to turn it into a structured format for your usage. So whether it's text or whether it's image, it's largely the same. In Zapier, you would use, whether you're using GPT, so OpenAI models, or if you're using Anthropic Claude models, it's up to you. For this example, I'm just going to use the ChatGPT modules, and I'll sort of show you how to set that up. So here, I need to actually set up ChatGPT because I haven't set it up yet. So I'm just going to quickly do that. Okay, so I've just connected ChatGPT. So I just put in the API key I got from platform.openai.com. Okay, so with the ChatGPT module, you actually need to use the conversation event. And once you're in there, what you need to do is just put in a very simple prompt. So I've just kept it super simple. I'm just saying, what logos do you see in the screenshot? And then I've kept it super simple, GPT-4o mini. It's not super complex what we're doing. And I've just passed in the URL, the screenshot URL from Dumpling AI. And then I've run this and the test results have come back. And if you see in the response, you can see that it's extracted all the logos that we want. So Mozilla, 1Password, PwC, Pika, all that sort of stuff. If you go back here, you can see that that matches, right? So if you have a use case where you do need sort of vision-based scraping, I would recommend doing something like this. Get the screenshot, pass it into your large language model. The other approach here with text, you won't be able to do the images, but if you only need, like as an example with a value prop, you can just come into the conversation. So instead of passing in the image, you would just get rid of the image. And instead here, I would say like, what is the value prop? And then I would include everything that we got from the page, right? So here would be the content here. And I would run that and that would come back with the answer to my question. Now, one final bonus method I'm going to go through is there are services out there that will do all of this for you, so you don't have to build it yourself. So, for example, Dumpling AI does have a extract method. So what this will do is it will sort of scrape the URL for you and then pass it through a large language model all for you, so you don't have to do any of it yourself. So in this case, what you might actually do is just put in Superbase, right? And then just say, just what are the companies and logos at the top of the page, and it's come back with all the companies here. So it's just a fast way of doing it. It's probably not as cost efficient as if you're doing it manually, but if you want the simplest, fastest way, save some zaps, this is how you would do it in sort of one step. Cool. So that's basically it for how you can scrape any website within Zapier. If you have any thoughts, questions, or feedback, feel free to leave a comment. If you want this template or whatever we call it in Zapier, just comment template below and I'll share a link to what I've built here. But with that, I'm going to close out this video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe if you found this video helpful in any way.